This is a presentation entitled, Hey Comrade, Where's My Country? Okay, it's playing off a theme from Michael Moore, but it's having a look at where South Africa is today, 25 October 2011, at the Medium-Term Budget Framework speech in Parliament, that's otherwise known as the mini-budget. Not many people pay a lot of attention to this budget because they wait for the main thing that comes along in February every year, but that's wrong. You get the future direction as to where things are going and a good feel for your economy, your politics, and your tax numbers by looking at the mini-budget. So let's see what it's about. It all hinges around growth rates. Growth rates are what increase tax collections. So we had the good times up until mid-2008, Lehman Brothers, with South Africa growing at an average of about 4% per annum. Then we fell in the hole with the rest of the world, but it was of short duration. We came back about a year later, and then we lived through 2010 with a pretty comfortable growth rate of 3 to 4%, everything looking much as if it was coming back on track, and that the global credit crunch was going to be, as many put it, just a blip on the radar screen. So when we get to the beginning of 2011, Treasury sets the target for tax collections based on a 3.4% growth rate from 2011 going forward. If that could be achieved, then the deficits would work out as follows. We had the disaster of 2010 with an actual budget deficit of 196 billion. We budgeted to do just as badly in 2011 at 183 billion, but because of the recovery and growth rates in 2010, that came in at 142 billion. Assuming that growth rates of 3 to 4% can be maintained, the budget deficit will then go 151 billion in 2012, 142 billion in 2013, and 111 billion in 2014. And over a 5-year period, the deficit as a percentage of GDP will drop from 7% at its worst point in 2010 to about 4%, which is very acceptable by world standards. So, if that could be achieved, there's the 3.4%, that would all be fine. But the problem that Gordon is facing at the moment is that first quarter 2010 was great. We came in at 4.4% there. That's fine. But now we've hit another wobble. And we've had a 1% growth rate for the second quarter of 2011. And it's not looking much more favorable for the remainder of the year. There have been quite a few worrying trends. On exchange rates, we've seen there the great periods where we sat at 6 to 7. That was fine. We hit the wobble and the problems over the global credit crunch where we went up to 10 for a brief period. But then things stabilized and we came back to that 6 to 7 comfortable space. So, going forward to 2011, it looked like we'd be in the margin 6 to 7. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened either, and recently the Rand has weakened to 8. If one looks at the effect on oil, it's quite frightening. We've had the difficulties with oil when the economy is really being performing. That puts a huge demand on oil and oil prices. That falls off. That's one of the benefits of having a recession. And then through 2010, oil prices stayed in a nice stable band at around 600 rands a barrel. And if that could have been maintained through 2011, that would have been very good for the economy. However, oil prices have fluctuated and so have exchange rates. And over the course of 2011, the oil price has gone up from nearly 700 rands a barrel to nearly 900. That's a very frightening inflationary trend. Consumer confidence, great in the good old days, but those are some years ago now. Then we fell off a precipice and all went in sulks during the global credit crunch. We rallied quickly because we got bored and went back to the mall. But now we're finding, hey, we're not coming back from the global credit crunch in a 4x4 with TV screens in the back seat. And we see that consumer confidence is off a bit. It's a little bit dull. Gold, well, that benefits from uncertain times. They're the good times, gold creeping along. We hit the global credit crunch, gold goes up as there is the run to gold for security. And that trend continues across 2010. And then, of course, the Rand price of gold for 2011 has gone up from just under 10,000 per ounce to just under 13,500. The balance of payments current account developed a black hole. In the good times, this recovers during a recession because we are not so heavily dependent on imports, and was quite okay for 2010, almost reaching a break-even point, certainly the best it's been in 5 years. But the indications of this year is that that's run out of steam a little bit. So, when one looks at interest rates, we see great going up as times are good, interest rates being slashed away as we fell into the global credit crunch. But then we still didn't get better, so interest rates have been slashed further in 2010, but then we see interest rate policy is not re-stimulating the economy, and so interest rates have had to remain flat through 2009. But the biggest problem of all is unemployment. Not that unemployment levels are at the highest that they've ever been. In fact, the highest levels were back in about 2002, where the combined rate of those looking for an employment and those who simply don't look exceeded 31%. That got better and better, and in the height of the economic performance, we see that that dropped off back to about 22%. But then we hit the global credit crunch, and the unemployment rate started to rise again. That tapered off in 2010, where we weren't losing jobs as fast. We only lost about 100,000 jobs in a year compared to 1 million in 2009. The worrying trend is that in 2011, the unemployment level has again gone back up towards 26%. And if one compares this to what's going on in the rest of the world, we see their unemployment rates sitting at 8 to 9% in the USA and the G7, for example, while South Africa sits up at 26%. That's a very frightening figure.